All right, let's go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Don Cherry Grapevine podcast. This week, we're going to run a Grapevine show that we taped back in 1993, and the guest was Dick Irwin. And Dick Irwin was a long-time fixture on Hockey Night in Canada, did most of the Montreal Canadian games. His father, Dick Irwin Sr., was the legendary coach of the Montreal Canadiens. And Dick was promoting his book, Behind the Bench, and it was stories about coaching in the National Hockey League. And the second guest we had that night, we did two shows that night, and the other guest we did was Red Story. And maybe next week we'll run Red Story's show. Just again, a great Canadian athlete that not too many people remember, but had some great stories. But this week was Dick Irwin, good friend of Dad's, as they say, a fixture on Hockey Night in Canada. So here we go with 1993 interview with Dad and Dick Irwin.
But first of all, we have Hall of Famer referee Red Story. Hey, Red. What a guy. 76. All right, I want to show this, I want to show this. Is this good or what? That's my good friend.
Knuckles now.
Beautiful. Rob McDougall did that, Rob. You did a lot of good ones to me. You do great work. But it says Bostonian. Is it a Canadian?
I'm sorry, I can't. At the time, he was a Canadian. I'm sorry.
And he's a good guy.
No,
and you do great work. Put it right there.
Thank you very much.
Right there. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about his book, Dick Irwin's book. Not a bad-looking book. I'm right there. See that?
You were younger then.
I know. See, my hair was brown.
Yeah.
I was before Harry Sinden. All right. Now, look, let me ask you a question. Right off the bat, we got to get Harry Watson. You saw Harry play. Now, I'll tell you a story about Harry. I talked to the old players back there from Toronto. When Baruchel scored that overtime, that great goal against Jerry McNeil, the guys tell me that played on that team. I mean, old guys, what am I talking about? The guys tell me that Harry Watson was the guy that saved the goal that was going in. He was the guy that the coach put on to score a goal, keep it out. Tell us about Harry Watson. Not in the Hall of Fame, 5 Stanley Cups. Go ahead, Red.
Oh, Harry was probably the best left winger that ever played for Toronto. And he was the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. A real nice guy.
Though.
And they used to say, all of the other coaches used to say, don't wake him up or he'll kill us. And that's the truth. If you got him mad, he'd wipe out your whole team and get a couple of winning goals on top of it.
Yeah,
he was something else.
He played about 20 years, too.
How come he's not? I was surprised when you came out on that and said he wasn't in the Hall of Fame. He should have been in there 10, 15 years ago.
Well, you know, and somebody out there has got to start pumping the drum for this guy.
Let's start right here.
We're starting right now, folks. Harry Watson, I know you never saw him play. Gary Bettman, go down the States here. Down the States, not in the States. Red, fighting in the game, what do you think?
Love it, under one condition.
What?
You don't drop the gloves.
Oh.
Because nobody... Ooh, are you tough?
Yeah. Look at that.
Hey, I didn't win all mine either, you know.
Yeah, I can see that, Red.
I didn't get this face and mind my own business either.
Yeah.
But, you know, in the old days, when they fought, they dropped the gloves and they fought. They didn't grab sweaters and have a waltz and all that garbage. And they didn't break their hand on a big plastic helmet. They fought and it was over, and you let them go. Let them fight till they were tired. They wouldn't bother you the rest of the night. But now they get out there and they waltz and all this stuff. I would allow fighting in the game. One condition, you keep the gloves on, and if you drop them, you're out of the game. And if you want to fight, go fight. Because if I'm refereeing and you want to fight, you go right ahead. I'm going to enjoy this too.
Yeah, you know the 3 words? I don't know, Red. I don't know. Anyhow, you know the 3 words I hated to hear when I was going in the fight?
Let them go.
Oh, no, I don't want to go. I'll tell you like that.
Hey, and I'll tell you something else. I have never seen a team in my life with more than 2 tough guys on it. Take off the helmets and you'll find out it's a very clean game.
There you are. I've been saying this all along. Now, we got to go to Dick and his great book. We got to go to Dick. Who's the best hockey player you ever saw?
Bobby Orr.
I like it right there in front of there. You agree? And now here he is, ladies and gentlemen, my buddy from Hockey Night in Canada, Dick Irwin. Come on in, Dick. Come on there, Dick. We're going to talk about the thing. And don't you go away. Be right back with Dick. Right off the bat, I want to ask you a question. Normie Dussault, your dad said whoever gets the winning goal, I know I'm throwing a curve to everybody, but tell us about what your dad did there. Remember that?
Playing in Toronto, and it was a tight game and a tight race for first place or whatever. And at the end of the second period, my father said to the guys in the room, somebody scores a winning goal tonight, I'll pay him $100. So a little guy named Normie Dussault, about 5'6", he drills one right past Turk Broda, top shelf. They win the game 2-1, so he forks out. There was a picture in the Toronto Telegram, my dad peeling off $100. He was in trouble with the league. They were going to investigate him and this and that, but Normie kept the 100, I tell you.
Yeah, right off the bat. 26 years, consecutive years. He that's unbelievable. He coached. I mean,
Guys today say, how long did your father coach in the NHL? I say 26 years, and they look at me. They're hoping to last 26 weeks, you know. But it was quite a record, Don. I'm very proud of it, certainly. He coached in a different era, of course. And,
pressure was just the same.
Of course it was.
Of course it was. Unbelievable.
You know, he went, 6 teams, 7 teams with the Americans. Different altogether, but I'm proud of what he did, and he's in the Hall of Fame.
I guess so. He fooled you a few times. You figure after a loss, he's going to, but he fooled you a few times.
I'm going to throw this back at you. My father would come home after a tough loss, and he was a bad loser, too much so, I think. He would fall asleep in 5 minutes like a baby. They'd win, he couldn't go to sleep. He'd be all excited and walking around. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. Jerry Cheevers told me the same thing for my book. He said, I used to go home and have a couple of beers, sandwich. I couldn't go to sleep when we'd win. Same with my dad, except with him it was tea, because he was a teetotaler. You see. What about you? How did you react to that?
Well, I had more than a couple of beers.
Well, that's all right. But really, though...
No, I used to go home, and then people laugh, and everybody had Blue, and I'd be in Boston. I used to go for a walk with Blue.
Yeah.
Honest to God, and then I used to, I was really pumped up, and you had the writers in Montreal, your dad had the writers. In Boston, they had every small city around there had to have a thing, so we had a 25-mile drive, so I was kind of cooled down. The inside would be all, fogged up and everything like that. But I used to have 3 or 4 pints and put me to bed.
Let me read you this. Don says he's on the front cover, which he is. He's also on the back cover of the book. And this is a quote, one of the many great quotes that Don gave me for the book. But listen to this. This is Don. Now think of our friend the coach standing in front of the Bruins at the start of the season at training camp. He says, when we would go to training camp, I used to tell the players we were taking off on a long voyage, and I was their commander. Lord Nelson, I'd say, some of you are going to be here for the long voyage. But some of you, if you don't produce, it'll be like a ship on a foggy night. You'll be dropped over the side, and nobody will know you're gone. I love that part.
That used to scare him right off the bat, I'll tell you.
Tell of the Hun. That's another one. His first year, he said he was Mickey Mouse, and he's paid the price. They were lousy in the playoffs. They got blown out. So he said, Don said, the next year when I show up at camp, Attila the Hun.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
I was Genghis Khan, too, I think. Anyhow, but 2 guys that really changed the rules in this game, and a lot of people don't realize, they see it now, Mighty Ducks and all that stuff. One was Lester Patrick. He changed a lot of rules. Tell us first about him.
Yeah, it's interesting. They go back to these fellows I did some research I have a chapter in the book called Some of the Old Timers. For example, numbers in the backs of uniforms. Never in any sport didn't have them. Lester and his brother went to England, saw them do that in soccer, changed the rules. First rushing defenseman when he played. Defenseman never, Lester Patrick. Goaltenders used to get a penalty if they dropped to the ice. Lester Patrick had them change that rule. These guys are innovators. Art Ross is the other one, right?
Ross,
he invented the puck that they use today, invented the net that they use today. I think he might have had something to do with the guards in the back of the skate. Like Achilles tendon thing.
So, I'd say Achilles, but I don't know how to say it. Yeah.
These old-timer guys, but there's something about the old-timers that I found, and I found myself thinking about you. In the 20s, well, really the 30s and the 40s, there were 4 guys who were coaching all the time. There was Art Ross in Boston, Lester Patrick in New York, Jack Adams in Detroit, and Irvin in either Toronto or Montreal. Now think about this. They saw each other every single season for 20 years. And they would play against each other, not like today, 2 times a year or something. They hated each other. They got to literally hate each other. And we saw a little bit of it last year with Burns and Melrose in the playoffs because they were seeing each other every night. But how can you get mad? How could you get mad at Scotty Bowman if you played him once in October and once in March?
Oh, I hated Scotty. I played him in the playoffs.
I gotta rise it. But, you know, that's the difference today. And those guys, Lester Patrick, in the old Madison Square Garden, they had a lot of hockey pictures up. My father was in a couple of them. And one night in Toronto, when my dad was coaching the Leafs, they went like this, nose to nose. And they both had good-sized noses, too. And they really went at each other, and they had to be broken up. Now Patrick goes back to New York, and he has all the pictures of my father taken down off the walls of Madison Square Garden, and they never... Those guys didn't like each other.
I know. Well, that's the intensity of the game. Told Blake, talk about an intensive guy. Boy, what a coach he was. He was tough.
The famous plane ride story. I can't use the complete language here, but the Canadians played, it was his last year as a coach, and they played in Oakland, California, and they lost the game to the mighty Oakland Seals. They're not supposed to do that, but they lose. Now they fly to LA. It's a terrible flight. It's bumpy, and people are ill on the plane and everything else. And Toe is waiting for the luggage now. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in the LA airport. And one of the Montreal writers decides, I'll go over and Toe stand. Nobody's talking to him. His hat's down. He's looking at the floor because he was a terrible loser. And he said, well, Coach, pretty rough flight, eh? And he says, I wish the bleeping thing had crashed.
Oh, now that's tough. I remember
and the players hear this, oh, God.
I remember we were flying in. We couldn't land. We were flying from forget where, and we couldn't land in Boston, so we had to land in Hartford. It was awful. And we really thought this is it. We're taking the... I says, well, it's okay, guys. We're all sitting in the back. If we go down in first spot. And Milbury said back to me, he says, yeah, with a game on hand. Now, that's pretty good. Now... Milbury, kind of a wild coach. Mike Milbury was with the Bruins too, eh?
Didn't like it when I asked him. I said, Mike, did you lose it some nights behind the bench? Ooh, I'm having a nice conversation with this guy, and suddenly there's ice coming between his eyes and my eyes, you see. But yeah, he let it get to him, and he said something. He quit coaching because he said it was too much of an effect on his family life. And he said, ask Rose. She'll tell you what it was like around the Cherry household. And I can relate to that around our household. When my dad used to come home after a game, they'd come home on the train after losing in New York or Boston some night, we wished he'd go right to the office. We didn't even want to see him at the house. Unfortunately, he used to come home all the time. But I don't know why, because he would never talk to us for about... I'm telling you, he would not talk to his family.
Yeah, I resented a little bit what he put in the paper, in your book there. I mean, and he said that Rose didn't enjoy life and the kids didn't enjoy life because I was a career coach, for all the time. But he was wrong, and I'll tell you why. I got Timothy involved when he was in. He could hardly wait to get to the rink. Cindy was involved in Rochester. She used to be down there helping in the office and everything like that. I don't know if Rose had a happy life, but I mean...
That's what he said to me. Ask Rose.
Yeah, well, we'll have to ask her sometime.
She did.
Jerry Cheevers now. He's another guy I coached. Geez, I'm a pretty good coach, all these guys.
Jerry Cheevers is probably the only guy in the National Hockey League's history who coached his first game with his goalie pads on. He's told me the story.
True story.
Yeah. Minnesota afternoon game, and he's coaching, and he gets thrown out with about 10 minutes to go.
Dwight Foster, I said, if that son of a gun, Greg Medill was the coach, I says, if he gives him a penalty, I'm not finishing this game.
And you got a penalty?
Did he ever? And I didn't finish the game. So go ahead.
So Cheevers is, and they're going for a shutout. There's a rookie goalie called Seaweed.
Yeah, Jimmy Petty.
That's right. And so they're going for this shutout. And so he said, I played all the defensive guys for the last 10 minutes, and they got the shutout. And they win 5-0. He said he went into your office after, put the big pads up, let out the cigar, and the whole bit.
I walked in.
But now they go to Chicago, and Petty is a kind of a party guy, and he treats the boys on the plane. He treats the boys when you get to Chicago. You start Cheevers the next afternoon. He gets about 55 shots on him because he's playing behind a bunch of guys with hangovers.
Yeah.
He said, I got him the shutout, and now I paid the price.
He always played bad in Chicago anyhow. Now, Freddie Sherrill, the Fog. I love the question he asked Hound Dog Kelly.
Yeah, I got to get this right. He said he's got the players gathered around him on the ice one morning. He says to Hound Dog Kelly, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? He was trying to talk about commitment to the team. And he says, I had ham and eggs. Well, he says, remember this. He says, the chicken made a contribution, but the pig made a commitment.
I like that one. Now, Glenn Sater, another guy. How's it going? Glenn Sater. He was another guy that was pretty determined guy.
Well, I asked Glenn, I tried to vary the questions to the coaches, and I asked Glenn, what was it like to coach Wayne Gretzky? I mean, you think about it. Here's the greatest guy, getting 200 points. I mean, that must have been really something. And Glenn was good. He said that he watched Wayne Gretzky develop like you'd watch one of your own kids. He, from the very beginning, he said, Wayne never got any special treatment. He had to go to all the meetings and all that. He was pretty good. But the one thing that Glenn said was he liked the competition of coaching. He loved coaching against Bob Johnson. He loved coaching against Scotty Bowman, against Mike Keenan. I think that's something that the fans forget a little bit, Don, that there is a competitiveness to the coaching aspect of it that we perhaps don't pay enough attention to, television guys, fans. And that's the thing that got me about Sather. He's a competitive guy.
Well, I remember in the book it says that he didn't treat Gretzky any different. He didn't. He practiced everybody. And it was the same thing with Bobby Orr. This is a true story. I used to come in and just rip guys. This here, this guy. I swear to God, Bobby come to me after a while. He says, look, Don, when you're giving the guys heck, could you give me heck too? I'll tell you, it was tough finding something, but I finally made it.
Hey, you just remind me. I'd like to break in here with a story. I know it's your show. Hey, every show I'm on is his show. What's the difference? It's the same thing. But you referred to Bobby Orr as your secretariat when you were coaching.
That's right.
All right, let me go back to the early 1950s. And you remember the National Hockey League teams never played each other in exhibition games. They always played American League teams, Senior League teams. And the Canadians are the Stanley Cup champs in '53, and they're playing in September in Valleyfield, which is about 40 miles outside Montreal. They had a fine senior hockey team that just won the Edinburgh Cup or whatever. Toe Blake was the coach. Yeah. Exhibition game Sunday afternoon. The Rocket is my dad's secretariat. You know that. There's no question about that. He's got a nagging injury. Something's wrong with him. He's not feeling so hot, and it's kind of working on him. So at the end of the second period, my dad said, as you probably would, okay, that's it. Take the rest of the day off because I don't want to take a chance. Rocket changes into civvies. He goes up into the seats. He can't find a place. It's sold out, standing room only, so he's up in the seats, the top of the standing room. And the guys are giving it to him pretty good Sunday. Hey, what's the matter, Rocket? You're too good to play in Valleyfield, and we're a too small town for you, and all this. And one guy in particular gets very, very up close and personal with this. Push leads to shove, and the Rocket lets him have it. Knocks the guy down the stairs. He is out cold. Best one-punch fighter in the history of the NHL. I've always said that. Yeah. So anyway, here's this. Now the police jump in, the fans, the players look up, and they say, ooh, Rocket's in trouble. Up they go in. Your typical Sunday afternoon at a hockey rink. You'd have loved it.
That's what I call hockey.
Now, part two. About 3 or 4 days later, I'm at a baseball game with my dad. The old Montreal Royals are playing the International League, and Toe Blake is at the game, and he comes over and sits down. My father says, what about that guy that the Rocket hit on Sunday? Is he going to sue us? He said, sue you? He said, he's the happiest guy in town. He's walking around up and down the main street, pointing to his black eye, saying, look what the Rocket gave me.
That's pretty. Hey, listen now. Al McNeil had to have the strangest coaching career of all time. Tell us about Al McNeil.
Al McNeil, I think I'm right in this, is the only coach who ever won a Stanley Cup and started the next year in the minor leagues. In 1971, he took over from Claude Ruel in December, and that was the year that he started in the playoffs. It's a young goalie by the name of Ken Dryden, who used to say Ken who, played in 6 games in the regular season. They open up against Boston. The Bruins have set all kinds of records, Espo, Bobby. They open up in Boston, and Ken Dryden's in the nets, and they win the series. Make a long story short, they win the Stanley Cup, and Henry Richard was benched in one of the games, didn't play much in one of the games in Chicago in the finals, and after the game, he's really mad. He said, Al McNeil's the worst coach I ever played for in my life. It's in the papers in Montreal. There's an English argument, French argument. It was an awful mess.
He was in Halifax.
And Henry scores the 2 goals to win the Stanley Cup. Al McNeil's coach in 1971. When the season starts the next year, Scotty Bowman's coaching the Canadians, and Al McNeil's in Halifax. But he said that he told me for the book that it was his idea. He went to Sam Pollock and said, look, this isn't going to work. There's too much pressure on me. The language thing was a problem.
He's from Halifax.
That's right, yeah. And he went down. He was a very good company man. Al did a great job and finally got back in the NHL with the Flames and coached them.
Yeah, and he's still there now. A good guy. Pat Quinn. Of all the guys that I've met in hockey, and everybody, I think Howie Meeker said it the best. Everybody in hockey, well, not everybody now, but they're great people in hockey.
That's right,
people.
exactly.
That's what he
I
said. Pat Quinn is the least affected of any guy. He's the same guy. He played for Tulsa, and I was in and he came to Rochester, and I took him on my wing. I said, "Come on, kid, we go to a party, we get a 6-pack, the whole deal." Now, he's the least affected of any guy. What a guy Pat Quinn is.
It's funny, Don, you mentioned that, because talking to a lot of the younger coaches in particular, John Paddock I can think of in Winnipeg, and 2 or 3 others that I talked to for the book, the one guy that they said influenced their career, Pat Quinn. Had played for him, or had studied his ways. He's a very, very influential guy in hockey. Exactly.
Yeah, I like when you talk to him. He's coach of the year and stuff like that. Next to me, who told you the best story? You're the best storyteller.
Well, I'm not going to say.
Me.
Yeah, I'm not going to say. There are storytellers like the Don Cherries, the Emil Francises, the Harry Neals, a little more serious guys like Mike Keenan and Scotty Bowman and so on. I just had a great time talking to them all. But you're the best. There's no question.
Well, that's for sure. I like that. Yeah. Gee, now, I had a strange one with Roger, eh? Like Roger Nielsen, a kind of a strange interview with Roger.
Well, Roger, I saw Roger in the middle of December in New York. He's coaching the Rangers. I said, Roger, I'm writing a book about coaching. Oh, good. That's a good idea. He said, about time somebody wrote a book. He said, you're coming to Montreal on the 16th of January. Let's get together. No problem. We'll have lunch, whatever. But he gets fired on the 4th of January, so he doesn't show up. So one of my coaches got fired, you know. So anyway, I did the interview with Roger on the phone, and it's not easy to talk to a guy a few days after he loses a job. And Roger's been around. I mean,
his
he's
dog died too. That
exactly.
Was, boy, I'll tell you.
No, really. Hold it.
Hold
it. That's not a funny story. Not at all.
Dog dies and you laugh?
His dog Mike went with him for all the places that he went. But no, Roger was good, and he was. I had him tell the story about what the paper bag over his head with Harold Ballard. It's too long. It's too long to tell now.
Well, no, give it just a quick one on that.
Well, you know, Ballard, they didn't have a coach. This was the funny part of it. He fired him on television in Montreal on a Thursday night. They go back, but they don't hire anybody else. And Roger has to hold his own news conference in Toronto to announce he's been fired because the Leaf management don't come down. They can't find anybody. Ballard comes down. He says to get his toenails cut by the trainer on Friday night. And well, that's what he said. And Roger's hanging around the Gardens. And Ballard said, what are you doing this weekend? Nothing. Well, you better hang around, which means you're going to be rehired. Now he wants to call them. Now, who's going to coach the Leafs? It's in all the papers. Nobody knows. He wants Roger to walk out with a paper bag over his head. The unknown coach, you know, like the unknown comedian, you know. And Roger was going to do it. But he got at the last minute, he said no. But he sort of walked in when they played the national anthem and the place went nuts.
Yeah, I was there. You really went crazy. One last thing, whipping boys. Everybody has whipping boys, right?
Yeah, I don't know about everybody, but they do. It seems to me that there has to be somebody, and you had yours in Boston. Yeah. You know, Bowman had Rick Chartrand, Pete Mahovlich in Montreal, and I guess there's a lot of others.
I had Peter McNabb and Bobby Miller.
Better explain what we mean now. That's the guy that the coach is always on their back, and if he wants to get a message across to the Bobby Orrs of life but doesn't want to talk to him directly, he goes after another guy.
I'll tell you a story about Bobby Miller. I was always on him. And one time, the Americans call you coach all the time, eh? Canadians just call you grapes or something like that. So he says, what are we going to do now, coach? I says, I'll tell you, player. So that was the end of that. But I got one little question. Wait a minute. I got one little story about Bobby Miller. He went out and got a tan in the playoffs. Now, you know, if you see people on television, the hockey players, Gretzky and all them, they all look white. They all have coals. It's a mark of honor that you don't get a tan. So he was an American kid.
You want the blue veins to show.
Yeah, you want
face.
veins and you want to look mean. So he goes out and gets a tan. So now we're going out to L.A., you know, flying out, and Cash says, oh boy, look at Miller. So he's all tan. I go back to the plane, I said, what are you doing with that tan? He said, well, geez, Grapes, I didn't know you're not supposed to. He says, well, what do you want me to do with it? I said, get rid of it.
Think about it.
Think about it. He's got to get rid of it. Yeah. We'll be right back with Dick right there, I'll tell you.
All right, wait, you just mentioned Wayne Cashman's name, and that reminded me of one of my favorite stories in the book. And you'll remember this. Wayne Cash is telling me about the time when Don was coaching him in Boston, and the team's not going so hot, and they go off on the big trip to the West, and Grapes is a little down on them, so you give them the silent treatment. That's right. You won't talk to them in the bars, you won't talk to them in the restaurant, in the dressing room, before the game, after the game, and he's got 20 guys all scared they're going to get sent to the minor leagues. And you win a game in LA, and you win a game in Oakland, and you win the game in Vancouver, and now you still haven't talked to anybody, and he walks around the corner in Vancouver there looking for a beer, and there you are sitting there, and you're saying, hey, it worked, Cash, we didn't lose a game. He said, and he said to me, he was a sports psychologist before they ever had sports psychology.
There you are, folks, what I tell you. I'll tell you what happened. There's a funny one. It's a funny one. In fact, I told Cash to take the guys to the bar night before a game, and I walked in and caught them and let on I was mad. Anyhow, put it there, Red Boy. Put it there, Red Boy. You my great buddies. With easy shows or what, folks? See you next week, folks. See you next week. All right. Don't forget the book.